going to introduce to you the folks that are going to be talking tonight. Kelly Smith is the founder and CEO of Prenda. He's kind of the original brains and heart behind what this is. You'll get to hear a lot of fun things from him. Katie runs our experience team. She is phenomenal. All of these people are phenomenal, but Katie runs everything from working with guides and students directly to building curriculum. It's amazing all the things that she's doing. Rochelle also has been with the company for a long time. I say a long time, we've been around for a few years, so it doesn't take a long time to be an old timer at Prenda. But Rochelle's been here since almost the very beginning. She's talked to thousands, literally thousands of people about Prenda and knows the Prenda story very, very well. And so I'm excited to hand it off to them. So once again, hello everybody. If you're just joining us, we're just gonna get started. I'm gonna hand it off to Kelly for the first part of this presentation. And then as we get going, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I will be monitoring and sometimes answering them from the comments, and other times I will call them out to the speakers and have them answer them as well. So welcome to the Prenda Online Info Session. Kelly, why don't you take it away?
Awesome. Welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be talking to you guys about Prenda. A lot of people ask me what this is and where it came from. So I'll tell a little bit about my personal story. So I'm one of these tech people. I had studied physics and nuclear fusion and worked for software companies. Basically a nerd, I guess you could say, in the most affectionate way possible. I'm also a father of 4 and very involved in my community. So at one point I had sold a small software company and moved home to Mesa, Arizona. And that's where I grew up. This was home. This is where family was for both me and my wife. And so being here was an exciting move for us. I had a little bit of time on my hands, and my oldest son was 8 at the time. And I told him, you, like every child, should learn computer programming. I felt like chess and computer programming were 2 things that kids should know. And I said, well, let's start with coding. Instead of just you and I doing it at home, we'll do it at the public library. And so you'll see some pictures here of the computer lab and the outside of the Mesa Public Library. Basically, we decided to make it a community thing, invite the neighborhood, and we started walking around, if you know Mesa, Broadway and Mesa Drive area, and just put up posters and said, come learn how to make a video game, make a website, and it'll be fun. And pretty soon we had a weekly code club meeting after school. Basically every Monday for 5 years or something, I was down at the library with kids. I got to work with thousands of them. I got to see the passion that they had for what they were trying to accomplish. One of the things that kind of stood out to me in the process of doing Code Club was that these same kids would come in and complain about school. Oh, I hate school. It's so hard. I can't do math. I'm dumb. I'm not doing very good. I'd hear stories from their parents, like they're getting in trouble. And I would watch them working on computer programming. They were able to solve very complicated, difficult problems. They were teaching themselves things like trigonometry and advanced math. I'm watching them do this all in the context of just making cooler video games. And I'm thinking, what exactly is going on here? Meanwhile, I'm experimenting with the way that I did it as an adult. So the first 2 weeks I stood up in front of the class, had my whiteboard marker, and I would try to teach them a concept or come up with like an activity or something that would teach what a variable is or what a loop is. And in the process of that, I very quickly realized that I was the teacher from Charlie Brown. If you remember those old cartoons where the teacher's standing up there just going, wah, 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 wah. And I would watch their eyes just glaze over. But then I would see them come back and focus and engage when it had to do with something that they wanted to build, something they wanted to learn about. So I scrapped all the lectures, changed it very quickly to see if you can build this project and then show it off to the class, and came up with what I didn't realize at the time was kind of the beginnings of a learning model. And I would watch these kids come back again and again. One of my favorite moments was one of my friends said, hey, we use Code Club as leverage to get our kids to do chores, right? And I was laughing because it's like, these are skills that, one, it's difficult, it's complex, it's exactly what human brains should be doing, coming up with, solving difficult problems through computer programming. 2, this is a great way to make money someday. So these kids will be, earning good livings as computer programmers if that's what they choose to do. And 3, it's something they wanted bad enough that they would do their chores at home just so their parents would drive them to the library to do code club. So I was on to something. It was an exciting moment for me. Meanwhile, I'm watching my own kids in school, and they're feeling some of the same frustration that I had felt as a student. And I'm thinking, could this work? Could the lessons that we're learning here through Code Club, could they apply to all of school, to English and math and science and social studies? And what would that look like? How would that actually work? Started researching a little bit. Being a self-respecting entrepreneur, I decided to start a microschool. And it was based on these two things that we figured out through the Code Club experience. And that's the next slide, Kaylin. The two things we learned were, one, learning is a choice. So I would watch these kids come in and talk about how they can't learn math and they can't do these things. But when they wanted to, when they were deciding that they cared, they were capable of way more than anybody thought, including themselves. And the second one, I think maybe a little more controversial, but teaching in the sense of forcing someone to learn something that they don't want to learn is actually impossible. And watching that, I tried it. I learned firsthand that when I cared about it, it didn't matter. When they cared about it, it mattered a lot. And so the question was, could we build a model, an education model that incorporate these principles and these concepts? And we tried it. I pulled my second son out of school mid-semester. I talked to some friends and they pulled their kids out of school. And pretty soon we're sitting around my kitchen table, me and 7 kids, and it's a micro school. And I'm pulling frantically from every resource I can find, trying to build what this model looks like. I knew the philosophy. I knew these core things that I had figured out through Code Club, but I didn't know exactly what it would look like. And over time, and thankfully with the help of other people, we got to a point where we did have a model that we felt strongly about. And as we've pulled this team together and looked at it, we asked ourselves, well, what are we really trying to accomplish? What's the goal of this? What's the mission? And so we put together a mission statement. You'll be sometimes expecting a very long paragraph with lots of semicolons, but our mission statement has 2 words: empower learners. People might say, oh, that's a little trivial. Like, of course you're supposed to empower learners. Like, that's every education establishment ever. But I think if you stop and think about what that really means, and we'll dig into these words, learners first. So the idea of being a learner is, I think, somewhat of a lost art. We've thought of life as a progression of hoops to jump through, or escalators to ride, or a path to get somewhere. A learner is somebody that's obsessed, that can't stop, that wants to gain knowledge and do things and act and learn and master concepts and master skills. Think of a person that will go on YouTube and take apart their washing machine and try to fix it. Think of a person that, in their mid-60s will decide to take up piano and sign up for lessons and give a performance for their friends. Think of somebody who wants to make a video game, or somebody who just wants to obsess over the difference between a virus and a bacteria. There's lots of different directions this can go, but the idea of being a learner is super exciting. This is a superpower if you think about it, and it's exactly what's needed in this complicated world. So as we thought about that and the idea of helping people become learners, we realized that the verb here, what we're really trying to accomplish, is we're trying to empower these people. So somebody that is a learner is empowered. They have the ability to do anything they want, to become anything they want. You stop and just think what a world would look like if every kid grew up thinking, I can learn that, I can do that, I can figure that out, I can do anything I want to do, I can take on any challenge that I believe in taking on. To me, that's personally a very exciting world to live in. And I believe in these kids. I've watched it up close. Some of these ideas might sound new age. I'll point out that they're actually quite old ideas. There's a Roman philosopher named Plutarch from 2,000 years ago that said, the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. And you stop, just think about the metaphor. You might think of, a human brain, and you imagine like pulling it open and pouring in, math facts and spelling words and the answers to a social studies quiz. Maybe you want them to hold on to this information at least as long as the unit test or the state standardized test, or maybe even longer than that, maybe all the way through graduation. That's one model. Plutarch was right, though. That's not what this is about. It's a fire. It's kindling a fire. And I think back to my experiences in the wild. If you've ever tried this, sitting there with a flint and steel, no matches, no lighter fluid. It's a cold, wet day, and you're trying to get a spark to catch into a fire. This is a tedious, painful, failure-ridden process. It takes a very long time. And when you do achieve this, finally, after lots of work, it's a magical moment. Thanks to Tom Hanks here in the movie Castaway, it's that level of excitement. If you look at that face, I felt that way during this first Microschool as I saw these 7 kids and I saw moments where they caught fire, where they cared about learning, where they felt the power of, I can learn that, I can figure that out. It's like, yes, like this is working. And I have a message saved somewhere that I sent to some of my friends at the time. I said, you guys, I've seen it. I've seen a future of education that's really, really exciting because it was in their faces and it was in the experience that they were having. And so everything we've done since has been to try to build a way to replicate that moment, right? Over and over again, give that to kids and help light those fires so that they can go on and be empowered learners, take on the world in whatever way that looks like for them. That's all I have. I'm gonna have Katie talk about the Prenda model.
Awesome, thanks Kelly. I'm super excited to share this with you guys. This Prenda model, the learning model that we apply in microschools and in families all over the place is super revolutionary. It's very new and it's working. I'm super excited about it. So the first thing you need to know about Prenda is that it's a lot more than exposing kids to academic content, right? That's kind of our view of what school is. You just gotta jump through the hoops and learn this stuff and get through it. But at Prenda, it's so much more than that. And we kind of like to sum up the way that it's a lot more than that with our Prenda core values. So start with heart, dare greatly, figure it out, foundation of trust, and learning over comfort. To us, this is not just about academics. It is about strong academics, and kids definitely get that at Prenda, but there's more to it. We really want to focus on this empowering learner piece. And so that when these kids grow up, they're not just people that can get good jobs, but they're happy humans that lead meaningful lives. And that all goes back to establishing a really healthy relationship with how someone learns and how they see themselves, and then how they interact with others and how they respond to challenges. So all of these things, so a little bit about my background, I'm a speech language pathologist, so I've seen lots of kids in schools working on really challenging things. And I also am a mom, and I've always homeschooled until Prenda. So I've seen a lot of this stuff firsthand. And something that's been happening in our home, I have a 5-year-old, and he has this whole year been participating in Prenda. And I kind of look at him now and I think of his pre-Prenda self and then his post-Prenda self, or mid-Prenda self, because he's still, you know, participating in it daily. And what I saw from him and his relationship with himself and with his relationship with learning, specifically around making mistakes, like it has changed because of these core values and our beliefs about learning, not just the academic piece, but like who we believe each child can become is totally changes our approach and our total take on what learning is even. So before Prenda, my little boy would say, he would make little mistakes, like he'd spill something. I mean, he's 5, he's a new 5-year-old. What 5-year-old doesn't spill something? And I wouldn't ever respond with anger or anything like that. It was just kind of part of what was happening. But he would say things like, I spilled this, you probably don't want me in your family anymore. Or like, I'll just go upstairs. Like he had this very, this relationship with making mistakes that was really fear-based. And it seemed like he felt like his value as a human and our love for him was based on getting the right answer or the wrong answer. And when he felt like that, he had no way to move forward in his path of learning because he was so afraid. So when we focus really hard on these core values, we're focusing on creating an environment where kids feel safe to make mistakes, to take risks, to figure it out. They believe that the discomfort of learning is is okay and that it's worth it to go through the discomfort to get at the learning. And so now when I see my son and he is making mistakes, the other day we were cutting strawberries on the counter and he spilled like an entire container of strawberries all over the kitchen. And I was like bracing myself for you don't want me in your family anymore. But what I got was, I'm 5, it's my job to make mistakes. That's how we learn. And I was just like, oh, thank you so much for helping him make this transition and this internal shift in belief. And so when we talk about the learning model, we're not just talking about learning math. We're talking about this bigger picture. So let's get into what the Prenda Day looks like though. And I will say a quick note here that there's kind of 2 versions to Prenda. There's a K through 2 version and then a 3rd through 8th version, kind of like a little kid model and a big kid model. The principles and purposes of all of the activities that we have organized in this learning model are the same for both ages, but the application of it looks a little different because we know that young learners need different things. So we want to really give them that support. We'll talk a lot about learner autonomy and setting your own goals for the older kids, but the younger kids have a lot more guide support and run things as kind of like a whole class. They do a lot of activities that are together. And then you'll see the old kids kind of differentiate into small groups or kind of everyone that's interested in learning about this thing will go in a certain way. But so that's kind of the main difference. And some of the activities are more age appropriate for K through 2 or 3rd through 5th or 6th through 8th. So principles and purposes are the same, and that's what we're going to focus on here in this presentation. And then the application just looks a little different. So you can be adapting the things that I'm saying to your own situation. Okay, so let's get into the first one, Conquer. And this is where we focus on academics, reading, writing, math, grammar, lots of things go into this. And something I want to focus on here is why we call it Conquer. And the main reason we call it Conquer, you'll see the little guy up there on top of the mountain, is because these academic skills present kids with difficulty, right? There's rigor involved. There's a right and a wrong answer. You can easily come up against something that you don't know and you'll get a wrong answer. And it's how you respond in that moment that determines whether or not you're a learner, right? Are you going to hit that moment and are you going to quit? Or are you going to decide in that moment to conquer? So we create this environment where conquering and struggling through the hard work of learning is supported. In typical society, I would say that everyone kind of approaches being wrong as like this big fear, scary thing, right? Like you don't want anyone to see you be wrong because then that maybe means you're not smart or that means that you're not good enough or like all of that stuff. It's like we want to create this space where we get you to your learning frontier where you're like on new territory and it's hard and there might be some tears and some frustration and we want to support you in that and congratulate you on getting there. So something that we love about Conquer is that we rely on technology to be able to find that learning frontier and to keep kids learning at their frontier day after day after day in a way that a human teacher might struggle to do. We let technology do what technology does best, and we let humans do what humans do best, which is love, nurture, encourage, and coach. So all of these programs that they're interacting with, they're not like entertaining video games. They're really high quality online learning tools that we've vetted. And we feel really comfortable and confident with these tools as a means to learn these academic skills. And it's really great because when you can meet someone where they are day after day, they're going to see so much more progress. So imagine you have a 6th grader, but he has some gaps in his reading. And instead of just getting those normal 6th grade lessons and getting further and further behind, he can go back to 4th, 5th grade reading and fill in those gaps and then go really fast, right? So if your student's behind, they can take the time that they need to fill in their gaps and to go slow and to learn at their own pace. And if you have a student that's right on pace, great, they can just go with that. And if you have a student who understands things really quickly and wants to go faster, awesome. all of those kinds of kids are sitting around the same table, interacting, helping each other, and building relationships during this time. Yeah.
One of the things that I want to jump in here,
Go
talking
for it.
about the mastery-based side of things and being where you are. I just visited a classroom recently that has a 6th grade boy in it that had just recently joined the Prenda class. And in his normal school environment, he had some major behavioral issues and was basically, the deal was he was going to get kicked out of school. He got a chance to join a Prenda class, and in that class, he saw some of the things you're talking about, where he saw his own abilities, his behavior became not a stumbling block to him because he was given the opportunity to just move. So he made this decision. He finished 6th grade math in the matter of a couple of months and is well into 7th grade math as a 6th grader. And it gave him this opportunity to go from I'm a kid that causes problems to I'm a kid who can accomplish anything. And it will change the trajectory of his life in that process.
I love that story. That's so incredible. And we see that over and over again as kids get into this environment and get this coaching and this new mindset wrapped around learning. So the next one, collaborate is great. So collaborate is the second part of the day. This is where the kids do a lot of face-to-face activities that are social and fun. The point here is that they learn to listen to others and express themselves, to work in a team, and to take all that academic information that they're practicing and mastering and to apply it to different things. Like they do debates and Socratic discussions, science projects, math puzzles, history explorations. They're researching together, they're presenting. We even do poetry tea time where they're memorizing poetry and presenting. And we do something called game school where they're interacting and solving problems and having fun. And then we have the K2 kids do like show and tell and nature study, all of these really fun, interactive, collaborative things where they're learning these skills that are in some ways and in some environments more important than whether or not how quick they are at their math facts. That's important and they get that in Prenda, but there's like a deeper learning that's happening and a lot of it happens in collaborate. It's really, really interesting.
Katie, I want to share a story. I visited a classroom that's south of the Phoenix area a couple of weeks ago, and exploration is one of the ways that we do history, as you know. And so it's about a place on the map and a spot on the timeline. And this class had decided that they wanted to study the country. They are doing one country per month. And so they'll spend a whole month studying this, one day a week studying that. So they decided to do Russia. So I come into their schoolroom and they have this huge map and they have Russia outlined in tape, and underneath it they have the timeline of Russian history, and there are little like pictures taped on different parts of the timeline. So we got to be there for the 2nd or 3rd week. So we end up out in the street in front of the house and they're playing this Russian children's game. And I call one of my friends who is a native Russian speaker and huddled them all around the phone on speakerphone. And they got to learn that animals in other languages make different sounds. So like Russian animals make different sounds than English speaking animals. And it was the coolest thing. They thought that was so cool. So then we go inside and one of the students is a 12-year-old boy. And I was talking to his mom about him later, and she described him, the reason she put him in Prenda, she said that he had become a shell of himself. That was her description of him. And over this couple of months he'd been in Prenda, he'd like blossomed as a human again. And so he's standing inside this classroom in this living room. And they've decided, because it's Russia, to talk about the ballet and the history of the ballet in Russia. And they all did 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th position, ballet position, standing in the living room. And this 12-year-old boy totally did it, totally nailed it, could do things with his feet that I couldn't do. And I was just like, this is the kind of stuff we want kids doing and feeling comfortable and just being in that space with each other. It was really fantastic.
That's incredible. Like that's a super good, that's a really good example of the core values in practice. Like they've established that foundation of trust. Obviously that 12-year-old boy feels pretty comfortable in that setting to take risks that he might not take normally, to learn things. And the other thing I love about that story is that like a Microschool guide has the flexibility to extend a project. Like you said that they were learning about Russia all month. It wasn't just like for an hour that they did that. But if it had been an hour, that would have been fine too. Like you can take things and expand them and run with them and follow the kids' interests. Like there's no arbitrary schedule or map that you have to follow. It's interest led, and you see a lot of the kids stepping up to like lead things. It's really cool. Okay, so that's collaborate, and the last part of the day is called create. This is where we get into the project-based learning aspect of Prenda, and we call it create because there's always a product. You'll see kids have some kind of physical product, like here you see looks like a diorama of some coral reef. There's lots of hands-on building projects. They'll do digital presentations, slideshows, videos. They'll do writing. They could start a business. They could do an art gallery, like all sorts of super creative endeavors. And we organize all of that into these 4 categories. So the first one is discover, and they'll do projects associated with history or geography. They'll be writing a lot in discover. Invent, that's where we see a lot of science, technology, engineering, math type stuff. They're building contraptions and figuring things out and inventing things. And then perform is where there's lots of projects that have to do with the like drawing and painting, and then like performing, like memorize a speech and give it to your class or in front of all of the parents or different things like that. So they see this project-based learning library in our software. Oh, I forgot becomes my favorite one. So not only are they applying all of their academic skills in these different areas, but then there's projects like develop a habit of meditation, or like interview a family member and like learn more about your heritage. So there's like, it really serves the whole child and not just like focusing on one aspect. And we ask them to explore all of these areas because maybe there's like a latent like watercolorist in someone and they just have never tried it before. And when they go to perform and they get that challenge, they're gonna get to explore that and they'll discover things about themselves, and it will change, you know, maybe what they end up doing in their life if they have this opportunity to discover and to dive deep. So that is create. I just wanna make sure I don't leave anything out.
So Katie, while you're looking at that, I want to jump in with, so I substituted a class for 6 weeks this time last year, and it was 6th, 5th, and 6th grade boys. And it was like a life-changing experience for me to actually be in a Prenda class and guiding these boys. One day we started talking, and they were talking about how we had a trampoline in the backyard, an in-ground trampoline that they used for their recess time. So we started talking about trampolines, and it got us into a conversation of an invitation that I made for them. Like, are you guys they talked about being interested in trampolines. And I said, what if you guys taught me the physics of trampolines? And they just like got really excited about that. Paired off, there were 3 pairs. One pair made a video about, and it was so awesome because they did, I can't even tell you how many like bloopers and retakes they did. They spent so much time, and then they had to edit the video. They did like the springs in slow motion and talked about the waves. I mean, it was just like the coolest thing. And then the second group did a PowerPoint presentation. All 3 groups ended up talking about Newton's 3 laws. The last group did a science project where they had a hypothesis and a conclusion. And we didn't talk about how to do a science project. They just like did that. They made a board. The handwriting in it was very much 5th and 6th grade boy, but they had it like all put together beautifully. I could tell they were going to crush it. So I invited all the parents to come the next week, and they presented this to their parents, and they were so proud of themselves for this. And this was just they did it over 3 days, and they were just so proud of themselves at what they had accomplished. And they learned displacement, you know, if you're a trampoline person like I am, like how you pop somebody up or steal their bounce, like they figured out the physics of that, and they think about that as they jump on trampolines. So it was super cool.
That's so cool. I love that they just took that idea and totally ran with it. That's incredible. I love it. Okay, so that's the model: conquer, collaborate, and create. And now we have a little video that we want to show that kind of highlights some real life experiences with kids that have been in Prenda.
Do you mind, Katie, if I ask you a few questions related to curriculum really quickly?
Yeah, let's do that. That's great.
Okay, so Angel asked, does Prenda create the programs?
Yeah, so we use a mix of things that are already out there that have been vetted, that are standards aligned, that we we bring into our program. And then if we see a gap and there's just nothing that really serves the need well, then we have a whole curriculum team that designs things, writes things, creates everything. So it's a mix of both.
Perfect. Also, Grace asked, she said, I have used Lexia before as a teacher and liked it. Can you list some of the other software?
Yeah, so our softwares, they depend on what the kids need. And so we have a really open mindset. We don't just like pick a software and just stick with it no matter what. So yeah, we use Lexia. We like Dreambox. Other good ones are Zern. We use Khan Academy. Yeah, those are the top ones that we use. There's lots of them. And then if we try a student on a software, it doesn't fit their learning style, or they're really unable to learn like that, then we can switch it out. The whole Conquer section of our software is very modular. So if you don't want to use a certain program, then we can swap it out and try a different one that might fit that student better. So that even further differentiates and individualizes the education that these kids are getting.
Okay, I'll have you answer one more question, and then some of these other ones will wait until the end, or at least further on in the presentation. So Katie, one question from Angel again was, does every class have scheduled or allotted time for recess or outdoor play?
Yeah, totally. So especially with the K2 kids, a lot of the activities are actually like very movement based. Like we have them do yoga, they go outside, they do nature study. So these kids are moving a lot. And then each micro school is in charge of setting their own schedule. So we have recommendations, like we say you should spend a certain number of minutes doing Conquer, a certain number of minutes doing Collaborate and Create. But then that micro school guide is like able to see like, oh, my kids, they need a break every 45 minutes, or this other group of kids might be able to do an hour and a half of Conquer. So it's very flexible and not set, and it can change, right? So like if you're a micro school guide and you've set a certain schedule, and then you see it's not working, you just have to adapt that to your kids. And it's super hyper localized. So they don't have to ask like, hey, Prenda, can I change this and this? It's like, yes, do what's best for your kids. We trust parents, we trust guides, we trust kids.
And along with that trust, maybe to answer another question, Haley was asking about a specific subject that, like, could a specific subject like logic be incorporated into the curriculum? And I think we've seen guides that have specialties or backgrounds or like really, really cool things that they can share, bring flavors they can bring to their class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That happens. And then in that Conquer time, there's also a whole section for if you want to set another goal, then you could find a resource that you like for logic or coding or foreign language or typing. There's lots of other activities that you can embed into that Conquer time to differentiate that education further. Like, for example, my son, he really needs to work on his handwriting. So for his Conquer time, I've communicated to his guide that it's valuable to me that some of that time goes for handwriting. So he's been able to adapt his schedule to incorporate that to strengthen one of his weaknesses. So
Kayla,
yeah.
I'll just jump in here too and say, if there's a particular passion or interest that you have as a parent or a guide as part of the Prenda community, you're welcome to share that. We've got this great community of people sharing ideas, and we've even been toying with virtual expeditions. So these kind of live events like this one, but it'd be led by somebody in our ecosystem that's sharing a passion of theirs. So logic would be a really fun one. Whoever put that question, just give me their info and we'll get that thing set up.
Yeah, that's another way that we connect kids. We have micro schools, but we also, you're connected to the wider Prenda community where other kids are solving problems and doing create projects, and they're able to see other kids and be inspired by that. We have virtual expeditions where we'll have, we've talked to all sorts of different experts or non-experts, just someone who has a passion and is willing to hop on for an hour to a video call and present their passion and get kids started with it and answer questions. So it's all about finding what kids are interested in and then connecting them to people that are also interested in that and fueling that passion, kindling that fire.
Okay, Katie, I'm going to ask you just two more questions because they're really good and I think you're the perfect person to answer them. One is, how do you measure mastery?
Yeah, such a good question. So that we do that in a few different ways. So a lot of the mastery-based subjects like math and reading and writing and things like that, we use technology to the technology can measure whether or not someone understands something consistently. So there's that piece to it. The guides understand how to go into the back end of that software and to see specifically, like the computer can tell you they're focused, they don't understand this principle and they keep struggling here. So then that guide can intervene. We can get them additional help in that area to facilitate that mastery. And then also, a lot of times what we'll see is like they mastered it in the program, but then we're not seeing that in real life. So that's not true mastery, right? So we'll take that idea, that concept, and we'll bring that up in like a coaching session to say like, hey, we've demonstrated this concept, like capitalization or commas or something like that. But when you write these things, like I don't see that mastery. Like, could you maybe think about how you could make a goal this week to focus on that and really make sure the things you've mastered are really mastered in your real life and in your habits. So a lot of it's done through coaching and just drawing attention to different things like that.
Okay. Katie, you're awesome. And these questions are also super awesome. So keep them coming. Last question before we do the video. Stacy asked, the projects that the students do during Collaborate and Create, how long do those typically last? Is it like one day, a few weeks, a few days?
Yeah, so we have like 8 different modes for Collaborate. So usually a Collaborate activity can just last one, like it rotates one per day. So like they'll have like an hour and a half in a day that they do that. If they choose, like, I'm really interested in this and we want to run with this, they'll do it repeated days. And then for Create, since they're working in small groups or individually, they can all move at different paces. So they're not on any one set schedule. So they can do a project and maybe they seemed interesting to them, but when they got into it, they're like, I'm not really interested in this or not passionate about it. And they're going to wrap that up in a day or two. But if they find something that really hits on a passion, we've seen kids go for 3 weeks and just dive really deep and have this really purposeful, meaningful outcome and product.
I was going to say, I think the record is a month. I had a pair in one of my classes that the project was write a biography. This is like one of the more advanced projects. And they did all the original research, like interviewed the person and everyone who knew them. I mean, it was like pretty intense and it was a very long biography. So they spent a long time and did a great job on it. But again, that wasn't me telling them to, they just got obsessed with it.
Right, that's the point, is like there's no due date and there's no you're done bell. Like if you're in the flow and in the learning, no one's gonna say like, okay, turn it in, you're done being interested in that thing. We want to fuel their interest and encourage them to keep going and to dive deep. Because that's when real learning that lasts happens.
Awesome. So a lot of great questions. I've saved some of them for later. I hope that's okay. We will answer all of these questions in due time, I promise. We're going to show a video now that hopefully helps convey some of the feelings that parents have had as they've had kids go through a Prenda Microschool. Hopefully our technology is going to agree with us here. It's a little bit, it's not always the best experience to show a video over a stream, but we hope it's going to show well for you here. So I'm going to switch over to this video and hit play.
My kids love to learn. They hate busy work, but a lot of his strengths don't come out strongly when in a typical classical classroom.
The teacher came to me halfway through the year and said, he needs to find another school. He's not keeping up with the curriculum. Our little friend down the street came over to play and I asked him what school he went to and he said Prenda.
We switched him over to Prenda and recognized almost immediately his confidence was building.
And I love Prenda because the project-based learning is tailored so well to kids that think outside the box. It's very kid-friendly and it builds on their natural curiosity and desire to learn.
I think this just works on so many different levels. Education isn't just filling a bucket, it's lighting a fire. And I feel like with Prenda, it has really lit Mo's fire.
You can go at the pace you need to. You don't have to wait for other kids, or if you're behind in that one subject, you can just go at your speed.
And the kids are thriving. They love it, and they love learning again, which had kind of fallen by the wayside.
My favorite part is math. My favorite thing is the projects.
The thing that he loves the most is debate. My son loves math. It's collaborative. He's talking with people. They're coming up with ideas.
They're just like so proud of themselves, and they just like really enjoy it. And that kids are more willing to, I think, listen to what they have to say and like have a conversation about that thing.
These boys in his group have just put their arms around him. They help him when he needs help.
If you know something's working, if a kid is going to do work that they're not asked to do,
They eat it up. They love it.
Just if everybody would do this, I think education around would be just, it would be completely turned upside down. He's learning to self-govern, that he's in charge of his progress. He knows his progress and he's driven by that.
It was kind of a confidence booster. I mean, where he's like, no, I can do this. And he just read it and did it himself.
I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything that specifically meets a kid's needs exactly where they are all the time. And it feels like Prenda does that in a way that it blew my mind.
If they can keep that spark all through their years, just think of what they can accomplish. It's going to be amazing.
Okay, you probably recognize some of our own movie stars in that video. Hopefully that video showed well for you. We have that video also on our YouTube channel. We'll post it in the comments as well. If it didn't come very well through, you can go back and watch it on your own. So I'm going to kick it now over to Rochelle, I believe, for the next section.
Let's do this. Okay, so we're going to talk about microschool details. So go ahead and give me the next one. A microschool consists of a minimum of 5, maximum of 10 students, ideally in a 3-grade range. So K through 2nd, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, as Katie mentioned. We do 16 hours. For the younger kids, we do 16 hours in school. So most of our schools meet 4 days a week for 4 hours. Our older kids are 20 hours in school. So most of them do, a 4-day week with 5 hours a day. We have these additional time that we call bonus time, that is time that they do education at home. We recognize that parents understand their kids better than anybody, and we trust them with their kids' education. So we're saying, take this time at home and choose to do with it what will serve your kids the most. A great example of that, especially in our younger kids, is reading and just advancing their education. But again, we have a huge list of activities that we are really excited about during that time. So that's one of the things we ask parents to do. So those are the details of the microschool. I want to tell you how to get started, because this is the part that I love the most. I love helping people who have heard about Prenda and walk up to me and say things like, this just seems too good to be true. I hear that probably more than I hear anything else when I teach people about Prenda. But the first thing you can do is go to, this is showing a link on our website, prendaschool.com/start. So you can see that there's a map. We have a map on our website that will show where existing microschools are and if they have space and the grade levels they serve and things like that. So that's sort of the first place you can go and look for a microschool. And if you click on that, you'll be given some information. Our team will answer questions and help direct you and connect you with microschool if that's possible, if there's one in proximity. So if you look at the map and there's not a microschool that serves you, there's an invitation that we want to make tonight. So becoming a guide. Maybe you've never thought about being the person that educates your child or is like, has that place. A lot of us don't feel adequate in that way or don't feel equipped. It's a little bit scary. Maybe you've thought about like homeschooling, but it just seemed too scary. The really cool thing here for me is when you think about Prenda, as you think about everything we've talked about tonight, this like Venn diagram of the best of the traditional model, online learning, homeschool and Montessori school and being student-led, being able to be the adult in the room that guides kids in the sweet spot of education, as you can see, like impact, like huge. I talk to our guides and the thing that surprises them the most is their own growth. their own, like how much it stretches them. It's hard. There are days that it's so hard. Kelly can tell you that. I can tell you that from my 6 weeks of subbing. But I've never done anything that has brought me that much fulfillment as I do that. It's a great part-time job, helps connect you, and we give you everything you need to be able to do that. If you aren't able to, for whatever reason, your life does not put you in a place to be able to do that, the next best option is to find somebody who lives close enough to you and that you would trust to be this person in your kids' lives. So the other question that we get asked a lot, sorry, Kaylin, I'm a little all over the place. Can I do this for just my kids? Great question. And we call that Prenda Family. And so it's everything that Prenda offers, except for we don't pay the guide in this situation, but we give them all of the training tools, softwares. We provide each child with a computer. Let me back up for just a second and talk about what a guide is. We didn't really go over that. So a guide in Prenda is what traditionally would be called a teacher. And from all of the things Kelly talked about in his experience of his very short experience of standing at the whiteboard and giving lessons and that not working out, that's why we call them a guide and not a teacher, because they're guiding students through their education that's being led by themselves, not standing at the front teaching them things. So those are the things that we can offer you as an opportunity to find a micro school that might currently be existing, to be able to start your own micro school, or to be able to start just with your own kids in Prenda Family. And all of those bring really beautiful opportunities for your own children and their growth. And it's just, Prenda's the coolest thing I've ever seen. That's why I'm here.
Awesome. So I think we're gonna, is it back to you, Kelly, or are we gonna do questions?
I can just thank everybody for coming real quick. And then, yeah, thanks for being here. And let's talk about questions.
Great. Thanks, Kelly.
That was a thing to say. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You did it very well. So I'm going to try to start in chronological order because I know there's some people that have been waiting for some of these questions for a while. So one that was a little bit a while ago, Elena asked, she said, I love this. So this goes to 8th grade. Do they get a certificate to move on to high school? Everything they learn here will qualify their children to move on to high school. What about the Ames testing and all that we have here in Arizona?
I'll take that one. Yes, when we work through school partners, and so part of the way in Arizona that we've been able to fund this is working through partnerships, either with school districts or charter schools. When we work through a partner like that, there are, obviously there's expectations that we take the tests. So we would take AZ Merit from 3rd grade up, and then 4th and 8th grade have the Ames science test. It's the same requirements that you'd see in other schools. We also do some benchmarking throughout the year. I think I would just flag on standardized testing that given everything we talked about with the environment of safety and love that we're trying to create, it's really important to us that the test is a small thing. And you can see this with the kids. There's no anxiety oh, I'm going to fail this test and it's going to matter in these ways. It's no, this is a way to look at where you are right now. But when you put that in the context of a growth mindset, it's all about, let's find out where I have opportunities to grow and learn. And so we really package it in that way, and we've found really good success where it hasn't been a negative the way I think some people have experienced testing in other settings. And then that applies to all of the K through 8 transcript we can provide then through our partners and transfer seamlessly into a high school. People ask us a lot where they go. We have kids going straight to, your traditional district high school, the bigger schools. Often it's because they want social things, extracurriculars, some of the experience of being in kind of a bigger place. But we have kids that prefer to go, work on their associate's degree while graduating from an online high school. Or homeschool. There's really the whole gamut. The goal for us by 8th grade is to get you to a point where you're that empowered learner and you can take on whatever educational environment comes.
Awesome.
Hey,
okay.
Caitlin, is there a question about cost somewhere in here? Because we didn't mention that. So if there's not, I'd love to address that.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump into that. Rochelle, do you want to talk about cost?
Yeah, just so that everybody knows, because that's one of the questions I get. They're like, this sounds great. How much is it? And so in Arizona, we've figured out a way for this to be tuition free for our parents through the partnership Kelly's talking about. So we have charter partners that we partner with, and our students are enrolled into that charter partner, and that gives us the funding. So there is no cost to parents, which is one of the coolest things about this.
Perfect. One follow-up question to cost. Marissa asks, if I'm in Utah, is there any, she said, what's the cost? If I'm in Utah, is there any hope if I'm not a guide?
There is hope. We're trying hard to get those costs down, but in that context where we don't have the partnerships with district or charter schools, we do rely on parents paying. So we can talk about that. There's some flexibility in terms of what's available, but we've kind of come up with what we can support, you know, from our end. Just to ballpark it, so you guys know where we're going with this. Arizona is one of the lower funded education states. I think Utah's a little less. Arizona's, I think, roughly $8,000 per child per year is the state funding for education. And in our model, we're trying to do it for $5,000. So that's kind of the number, $5,000 per child per year that you can have in your mind. A lot of that, more than half, goes to the guide. So there's, you know, it gives you some sense of the economics for how this could work.
Okay, another question, and this one we get asked fairly often as well, is Prenda accredited?
I'll take that one too. So Prenda's a service provider, so we work with schools. So that's, you know, the technical configuration. So no, we haven't gone through kind of the advanced ed or some of these accreditation entities. They tend to be pretty big and regulated in terms of creating your own private school accreditation. But that said, we work with partners that are accredited, and so that's allowed us to collaborate on the important pieces and make sure that the curriculum's aligned. I think Katie mentioned this, but everything is aligned to what state standards are. So in terms of the academics, you're getting the things that you would get in other places. The way we do it is significantly different, but that's why we're here. We're excited to be different.
Thanks, Kelly. Another question is, are classes always taught by one guide?
I'll take this one. Almost always. We have a couple of places where we have co-guides working. We've had people talk about sharing the duties as like one guide taking 2 days and another guide taking 2 days. So we have openness and flexibility for that, and we have it happening in some places.
Perfect. Okay, another question by Angel was, do any of the schools offer after-school care, being that the school days are shorter than traditional schools? Not sure how this schedule would work for working parents.
I'd love to take that one. As we've watched, what happens is every micro school creates its own community and meets the needs of that community. And so in a situation like that where there are working parents, the guides, we've found that guides have, either guides or other parents, have found really low cost ways to extend the day and enrichment programs that allow kids to continue to do things that are meaningful while being in their education environment long enough for their parents who are working. It takes the community to create that. That's not something we at Prenda create, but it's really been amazing to watch the creativity of these communities like meet those needs.
Awesome. And maybe Rochelle, you can take this one as well. If not, you can feel free to pass it to somebody else. This one says, my biggest concern of joining Prenda is losing our homeschool legal status because there are not a lot of classes available in our area. What does Prenda do for a class whose guide can't do it anymore?
I'm assuming that means like the guide stops mid-year. Is that what your assumption on that question is?
I believe so.
Katie, do you have anything specific on the homeschool side of that?
Yeah, I used to homeschool, and when you do Prenda, if you're in Arizona and you work through a charter partner, you do give up your homeschool affidavit. But we found, like I had to do that, and it was It's been fine. There's enough like community support and other like connections that you find when you do Prenda. Like you might feel like you lose something when you homeschool, but like you're gaining like a ton of other connections and classes and continuing opportunities there, and those are always growing too.
Awesome.
Kaylin, just one more thing on that. So the expectation, we talk to guides when they sign up about staying for 1 year. So the idea is that you wouldn't be dropped mid-year. It has happened, so it's not that it's a guarantee, but the goal and the overwhelming majority of cases, you have continuity for that year. And then what tends to happen is actually the opposite of that, where if a guide does decide at the end of the year, maybe they for whatever reason aren't going to do it the next year, but out of the group and the parents and the friends of the parents, we typically see 2 or 3 options in that neighborhood the next year. So it's you would expect to have more options in the future. So if you were feeling like I'm relying on Prenda for the next several years, but my guide can only do this 1 year, don't worry, other people will step up, and you may step up, right? Like Rochelle talked about, it's fun to see people start as, I just want to send my kids somewhere, and then see what's going on and recognize that some of the gifts that they have and their skills and abilities would be perfect for that. And they step up and run a micro school the next year. We see that a lot.
Kelly, do you want to quickly comment on guide schedules, like how much autonomy they have? There was a question about how long guides go, and then somebody just asked, Elena just asked if this is year round or if they have breaks like public schools.
Yeah, I love this question. So it's fun because it's just such a sensible answer. Instead of some remote legislature making these things up, we are given a number of hours per year from the state. So that's the one thing that we're given. But in terms of how you do it, year round or 36 weeks, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 5 days, there's like different, you really, as long as you get the hours, you're good. So you can go through the summer, you could meet, if you wanted to meet from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. every day, and you found parents that were willing to do that, you could do it. I'm not recommending that. I think children should sleep, but they're like, this guy's crazy. The point is flexibility, and it's up to each guide and their community. What we see in practice is a lot of people mimic whatever the school district near them is doing, because you'll have people with like siblings in high school or something, and then you'll want to line up vacations and stuff the same way. So that's normal, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to ask, I think Katie might be the best one to answer this question. Candace asks, does each micro school purchase their own supplies? I see robotics going on in the video.
Yeah, so that robotics shot is from one of our larger events that we do, where we as Prenda facilitated that for our whole for like all of the micro schools. So we'll do bigger events with really cool opportunities like that from time to time. We provide computers, all of the learning softwares, physical manipulatives, a budget for school supplies to run a school out of your house. We provide a lot of what you need, the vast majority of it.
But no robots. But those are at the library. So if you want robots, let me know. I can introduce you. If the libraries reopen, we'll get you back.
And I will say that there are like communities, again, these individual micro schools that are like, we want to do robotics after school. And so they, with the parents, collectively make that decision for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Or like if that guide teaches music or something, they say, you can stay an extra hour and I'll teach piano or I'll teach this stuff. So there's lots of like really creative things that are happening, and it's so beautiful.
Okay, this question might be a good one for Katie and Kelly, perhaps, to tag team. So Stacy's asked some really good questions. She asked a bit about standardized tests and where they place with grade level standards. She says, I would love to know how Prenda students do compared to the average traditional student. And then later she asked, related to that, she asked if is there any evidence that a Prenda education allows students to master material beyond their grade level faster or better than a traditional education?
I'll start that, and then Katie, you can pile on. It sounds like a learning scientist here. There's a lot of, there's obviously a lot we want to do, and we are taking Galileo benchmarks 3 times a year. We're seeing growth. We're watching progress in our learning software tools that we use. AZ Merit specifically, which those of you who know the way the state works, is the only thing that anyone cares about. We have one group of 30 kids or so that we had all year last year, and we were able to watch growth there. We had really good results with that. I can't say better than state average because I don't know, but it was definitely like we surpassed some of our benchmarks that we had compared to. And then in terms of the real sample size is this year we have many more students, and we're hoping that we'll get a chance. I mean, obviously you don't hope for standardized testing, but in a way you do, because it'll be good to see those kids year over year, the kids who we've had all year. It'll be a much larger sample size, so we'll have a lot better data on that. And happy to share it. We've got some independent evaluators and people that have been really looking at working with us on this and being able to do that analysis correctly and in a way that's fair.
Yeah, we're definitely tracking all of that and very interested to see those results with this larger sample size. And something we did learn last year is we can take, I mean, we have, because of a lot of the academic learning is done through online tools, we can see and measure their progress as they participate in these tools. And then we can chart that, what we see in their program, their online learning tool, against how they do on the test. And what we see is that those, if they know it in the online learning software, they can show it on the test. And then what matters more to us is, can they do it in real life? And does it transfer? And so we're not only looking at data and state testing, but like also on top of that, there's this layer of like meaning and purpose and like real life application that we care about. So yeah, we're super excited to have all of those, more information on that coming for sure.
I also just wanted to maybe mention, and Kelly and Katie, you can obviously chime in, anybody can chime in on this. Anecdotally, so obviously we're awaiting some bigger sample sizes and data sets to be able to publish and put out there. Anecdotally, it definitely appears to me, I've heard a lot of students, I guess I will put it this way, I've heard a lot more students in Prenda that have talked about going beyond their grade level than I do normal students from, say, my local district here. And that's partially because there's just a freedom and there's not a built-in limit as to how far you can go. You're not waiting for the rest of the class to catch up, and you're also not feeling behind while everyone else moves ahead, you know, past your level. One of the beauties of Prenda and that freedom and autonomy is that each student works according to their own pace. You saw Mo in the video, the boy with the hat. He's one of our favorite students, and he was able to go from being behind in grade level to much beyond his grade level just by virtue of the fact that A, he felt empowered as a learner, and B, he was able to move through math as quickly as he wanted to. And once he caught that fire, he was able to go much further than any classroom normally would have expected him to go. So that's one important thing to consider when you're thinking about grade levels is, you know, they're obviously important in terms of state standards and tests and things like that. But in terms of what the students learn, they can go as fast and reach as far and climb as high as they want to. Can we talk about blended classes for a moment? There was a couple of questions mentioning mixture of ages and how they would be grouped while they're guiding. Katie, maybe do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So our kind of ideal buckets are K through 2, 3rd through 5th, and 6th through 8th. But in real life, we have what we call a blended microschool, where there are families that have come together to school their kids together, and they have kindergartners, first graders, 3rd graders, 6th graders. And so they've kind of taken the two models and found really interesting solutions and ways to have everyone learning through that like wider age span. So we don't say no to that. It definitely presents some unique challenges. So, but there's also some really cool, beautiful things that happen where you see older children mentoring and teaching younger kids, and older kids learning to be really empathetic and nurturing and kind. And you might not see some of those things if they were just all with 7th graders or all with 6th graders. It invites a different part of their humanity out. So there's pros and cons to it, and we don't say no to it. It's up to the guide and the families.
Cool. Okay, another question. I'm going to direct this at Kelly unless he wants to pass it to somebody else. But Stacy says, I'm biased towards Acton Academy. Why should I consider putting my kids in a Prenda school outside of Arizona over an Acton Academy?
Yeah, great question. We love Acton Academy. In fact, have a lot of friends over there, and we've shared a lot. As you can tell from watching, there's a lot we share in common. I think the big difference is Prenda's made to be much more organic and almost cellular in nature. So where an Acton starts around a founder, somebody who really wants to be entrepreneurial. In fact, they filter for that. You know, you have to be kind of a business person to start an Acton Academy. Prenda is much more driven around typically a parent, right? It's somebody who's just like, I just love kids. I don't necessarily think of myself as a business owner or a school proprietor, but I could, you know, help 5 to 10 kids in my house. So there's that organic nature of it. The price point tends to be lower outside of Arizona, and that feel is more home-based, organic, even than Acton. And Acton does, like I said, a great job, and it's a place. If I lived close to an Acton, you know, maybe Prenda wouldn't even exist because I didn't hear about it until later, but I definitely would have happily sent my kids to an Acton Academy. So with all, you know, love and respect for Acton, we really like them.
Can you talk about the process? Maybe Katie, can you talk about the process that guides go through to be vetted and maybe background checked? What all do we put guides through to make sure that kids are going to be safe?
Yeah, that's something we take super seriously. So when you say you want to be a guide, the first thing you do is a culture survey. So we kind of get your heart, why you want to do this. We select for culture and mission to make sure that that's a fit first. And then you go through an interview process, and then you are onboarded, and that includes a background check. You have to obtain a fingerprint card, and then we put you through training. You have to shadow a guide to see what a microschool is like, and then we coach and train until we feel like you are ready to invite other people into your microschool. And not only do we do that up front, but then we have a coaching program where we are doing on-site visits from our team, making sure kids are safe and that guides are feeling empowered to do their job and to kind of help them problem solve some things in really cool ways. And so you always have that support, the training's there, but then also this continued support and coaching where we're always monitoring kind of the health of that microschool. And when we see things that are not done in the Prenda way or situations that aren't making parents happy, we can intervene and coach and help facilitate those conversations so things can improve. And that's our aim, is to get every microschool to just be a really healthy place for kids.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. I'll just open this up for anybody to answer. Candace asked one about guides like transporting children to other locations. I'm assuming things like field trips and stuff like that. Any guidance or answer for that? Nobody wants to take this one.
Yeah, I'll take it. We love field trips. There's, you know, we talk, they can have their parents sign sometimes the parents help drive. They can have the parents sign a waiver. And that's one of the things I love about Prenda is schools. Field trips have become a thing of the past almost across the board, or they're really few and far between. We have a class in Flagstaff that spent the very beginning of the year going on a field trip once a week because the guide recognized that was how that class was going to create a culture that would make them successful for the rest of the year. So those are opportunities that are really awesome at Prenda.
Thanks, Rochelle. Okay, let's, who can talk about bonus time for a moment? There's some questions about guide hours, and I've noticed, by the way, a lot of Prenda folks, Prenda guides in the comments answering questions, which has helped me greatly because there are a lot more questions than I anticipated, and trying to keep up with them has been a challenge. So would somebody just talk about bonus time for a moment and how that works?
Sure. So specifically, we talked about it a little bit. So specifically, at home, these are hours that they do at home. Again, we have a big long list of approved activities, and then parents can let us know. For the K2 students, the parents put the bonus time in and the guides approve those. For the older kids, the kids put the time in and the guide approves those, or the parents approve those, so that we know that the things that kids are putting in as their bonus time are things that they've actually done. And the really cool part to me is that our guides are compensated for the bonus time. And it's a really great way for parents to support the guides, because we know that guides are doing things to help their classes outside of their classroom hours. And so we love to have this extra compensation that helps them like cover that time that they spend and the emotional energy they spend to have their micro school be really healthy. Does that answer the question, Kaylin?
Yeah, I think so. That's exactly, they were just trying to get some details about it. I think that's perfect. Okay, so another question, and maybe Rochelle, you can talk about this one as well. As guides come into the system, who finds children for the classes? Is it the guides or do we?
That's a great question. So ultimately, it is the responsibility of the guide to recruit their own classroom. With that said, again, we have the map, and a lot of times we have parents that come into our system and reach out on the map to join a micro school or to find a micro school in that area. And we will, one of the things you can't do in Prenda is you can't just enroll a kid and say, please put my kid somewhere. Like, it's really important that the parent and the guide meet and feel like that, both of them feel confident and comfortable in that connection. And so we at Prenda will introduce guides to parents, and they can determine whether or not that's the right fit. If it doesn't feel like the right fit for the parent, we'll give them opportunities to meet other guides in their area.
And everybody has the opportunity to do the Prenda family option. So everyone's invited to Prenda. We can take as many people as want to come. This micro school idea, because it's this organic thing meeting in someone's house, we're really big on making sure that's a mutual association. So a lot of our strongest micro schools are people that live close to each other. Maybe they knew each other before, but even if not, they quickly become almost family. I mean, there's these like connections that run deep, and it's really cool to see people that didn't necessarily know each other well. Now they're kind of play dates after school and signing up for sports together and things like that. So those connections are one of my favorite things about it. Is it's a very fundamentally human interaction.
One of the things I love is when you walk up to a micro school and there are bikes laying outside the front door. That's one of the things I love, because that means they're close enough to just ride their bikes and, like he said, and scooters to their school.
Great. Let me see if I can find any last questions here. I think we've gone through the vast majority of them. We may have already answered this one well, but if maybe somebody wants to just comment on this. Grace says, can you talk more about interest-led learning for students? My 11-year-old has been following with great interest. She's a former autonomous homeschooler who has gone to school for the last 2 years. She got so excited about being able to do science and social studies, which is a sad commentary about what is valued in traditional school. Anything you want to mention with regards to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that facilitates that is that there's no like due dates or timelines. So like if you have that interest, like you can go with that for as long as you want. You can say, hey friend, I'm really interested in this. Like, do you want to be interested with this? Like, are you also interested in this? And like, can we do this together? Another great thing is that in the create mode, they can actually create their own create projects, and we have like we teach them how to do it, and there's some requirements and a template they have to fill out with the purpose of their project and all sorts of things. So it's really organized, but it's totally them. Like there's no one saying like, and these are the requirements for those projects that are just coming from their hearts and their minds.
And I'll give kind of the counterpoint to this, which I'm all about interest-led and children having autonomy. But one of the things that I think, if you think about life, we do have accountability to other things, right? We're part of a group and part of a structure, and maybe we work for a company and there's like these interactions. One of the things that I really enjoy about a micro school with 10 kids is it's interest-led in go around the room and everybody takes a turn. But on my day that I get to pick the interest, everyone has to care about and participate in that. And I likewise am accountable to my peers to care about and learn about. So it's not in the sense that, some people might say, oh, interest-led, like kids just gonna do, dinosaurs like 24/7 and never learn anything else. It's like, no, actually, like there's this group, right? And so one day it's dinosaurs and the next day it's, unicorn fantasy. So it's like whatever the topic, I don't know if that was maybe a good example.
I'd love to learn more about unicorns if you have
Yeah.
that research.
Sure. Yeah, I have a good novel I will recommend.
Yeah, I love that. There's definitely like Prenda is really big on autonomy and choice, but there's also structure and coaching. It's not an unschooled environment, but it's not the other end of the spectrum where everything's dictated. It's like this really interesting sweet spot. And what we find actually is that a lot of kids feel uncomfortable with their autonomy and they want someone to tell them what to do, and that's really frustrating when their guide refuses to do that, and that student needs to like lean into their own autonomy and find that. So we see both ends. We see kids that are naturally motivated and like know what they're passionate about, and they run and they bring a lot of kids with them, and then there's this other side where kids need a space and an invitation to grow into that. And so there's freedom and there's structure in a really unique balance.
You can tell it's working when you see the fire in their eyes, like we talked about, you know, this fire for learning. But you can also tell it's working when you see a culture where learning is cool. And you walk into one of these micro schools and look around and you can feel that. It's like, this is just what we do here. Like, we learn stuff. And somebody that might have been reticent about it just goes with the flow and they learn. Because it's not like an adult telling you, you have to do these things, right? Which immediately, what's the human response to that? It's like, well, I'm either going to like act out or try to like just do my minimum and get by, or, you know. But like when it's the culture is we're going to learn and we're going to dig in and do this together. This is what we do here. There's something really, really powerful about that. And we get to see that over and over again in these micro schools.
Katie, can I have you expand a little bit, or maybe again, just sort of mention about the curriculum? And maybe the right way to answer this question is more about like what happens on a typical day. Because Angel asks, you know, I understand Conquer, Collaborate, Create, but like what exactly are the kids doing? She wants to see a little bit more structure. Do you want to talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, I wish I knew how old her kids were so I could speak specifically to that. If she's able to, I know there's probably a lag. Yeah, so Conquer, kids are on computers learning those academic skills. Is that, Kelly, do you feel like that's clear enough? Or
for the little kids, they're practicing handwriting and phonics. So I don't know if it's always computers, but they're working at, I mean, imagine like a mountain of English and math standards that you need to learn, because that's what everybody learns. And you're setting daily goals, like you're moving your way through. So like
I think talk about goal setting. I think we haven't touched on that.
It's something that a responsible, successful adult can do. And so we've built that into the model. And as young as third grade really is where that kicks in. Even the younger kids do a little bit of it. But imagine a third grader saying, you know, I'm at 14% of third grade math. Khan Academy tells you exactly where your mastery is. And you know you need to get to 100% by the end of the year. We'll break that up. And it's, you know, if you do 1% per day, you'll at least make it through third grade math. And so my goal is to get from 14 to 15 today. Really concrete. I can see exactly when I'm there. And sometimes it's frustrating because I'll go up and I'll go down and I'll miss some problems. And that's where the tears and some of the struggle that we talked about, but creating that environment of, you know, positive encouragement and coaching. Guides have hard conversations with kids on a regular basis, right? It's like, but it's great because you get an opportunity to express, like, I believe you can do this. Like, I trust you to do it, figure it out. And I'm here to help give you ideas and things, but I'm not going to do it for you. I'm not going to just let you skate through with 75% of it understood. Like, I'm going to insist on you learning this, right? And you can do it. And that can take a long time. You can imagine like day after day, like really struggling with a topic. But eventually, like through various resources, Googling different ways of learning about something, searching for, you know, additional materials, asking other kids, the guide talking, there's lots of ways for learning to happen. And every kid, it's going to be a different puzzle. But you can imagine that process happening during Conquer. Hopefully that explains it. And then Collaborate, you put away the computers typically. It's like, we're going to go sit in a circle. You saw some of that video where I was doing a Socratic discussion about Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, right? And the kids, you do the text together. You can read it together or they can read it separately. There's questions that each kid is supposed to bring to participate, and then thoughts and ideas that they're going to share. And you coach them, you as the adult coach them on how to run a Socratic discussion where you're not part of it. You're really, the behind the scenes trying to help each kid participate and engage. And that will last 45 minutes or an hour. And then on the Create projects, there's project prompts that we give them. That's all through our platform. But then, that might take them to the recycle bin to get some stuff, or it might take them to, beg somebody to drive them to Walmart so they can get some fishing line or whatever. There's so many different directions that it can go. It's amazing to see once a child decides they want to learn something and to dig in on something, it's just fun to watch them engage with it. So that's what you'll see in Conquer.
Yeah, and with those Create projects, we've built them out in a way where we're aware of the standards and the skills that kids need to master. And so we've kind of baked those in to the requirements. It's not just like, here's an idea, do whatever you want. Every project that they do has a purpose, and then like check boxes of like, whatever you need to create or whatever you're going to create needs to meet these requirements. And then they can, through like having that creative constraint, solve that problem in a new and unique way. But it's not just like, just go throw some paint somewhere. It's like, find a resource that's going to teach you, like make a plan. And it is pretty well organized.
Great. Okay, I think we've gone through, maybe we'll do one more question here. It seems like the questions are thinning out just a little bit. And if there are more, please feel free to ask. But
it's getting late.
Yeah. Candace asks, oh, I'm sorry, I just lost my, yeah, Candace asks, what do you do if a child isn't making a lot of progress in English or math? Kelly, you just kind of talked about this. Do you want to give like any specific instances where like you had a conversation like that?
Katie said right off the bat, right, that we want to let technology do the things tech can do well, so that the humans can do what humans do well. And this is the crux of it, you guys, is right at the core. Like I said, I believe teaching is impossible, meaning I can't really force you to learn something. Like I can get you to sit still in a desk for a while, or I can like threaten you with something so that you will do a worksheet. But to really get you to learn something, I need you to care about it. And so that's different. That puzzle is different for every child. I'm happy to report that with something like 700 students, it's happened maybe once where, we had a kid that just refused. Like I not only will not learn, I will also try to prevent other people from learning. And that was a hard conversation, as well. But I think there's, in almost every case, it doesn't happen right off the bat, but there's this opportunity for a kid. There's this invitation extended to them, which is, look, I believe in you and I'm here to help you, but I need you to step in as well, right? And the kids, it's amazing to see how they respond to that fundamental invitation. What's interesting about it is that can be a kid who's behaving in ways that adults don't like. It can be a kid who's struggling academically. It can also be a kid that's doing great academically. Like I was one of these kids that did well in school. And part of this for me is no one ever really called me on it. What I was doing was jumping through hoops because I had learned how to play the game. I got straight A's with deliberately bragging to my friends about never getting more than a 91%. I would like skip class just enough to where my grade was barely an A. So if you think about that kid and imagine one adult that would go to him and say, hey, you're capable of more than this. That invitation is, I don't think we quite even fathom like how powerful that can be, is this one caring adult that really believes in you and gives you that chance to step up. So not to say I know that all of this sounds fluffy, but I mean, if you think about what we're talking about here as humans, and the human heart is complex, and creating that, an environment where there's safety. That's why we talk about start with heart and foundation of trust. These are really, really critical to doing this right, is creating that environment. And then they start to see these learning skills and behaviors modeled, not just by the adults in the room, but by their friends. And pretty soon it's like, well, maybe I could learn something.
Totally. I agree with all that. I'd say like 80 to 90% of the time, it's an emotional thinking thing that's going on, not I don't understand this content. But in those times where we can tease that out, where it's like the student is willing to learn and they are motivated, but they still can't learn, like there might be a learning difference or some accommodation or intervention that they need, we can work with our charter partner to get them special education services. They can be tested for if they need additional help. A lot of the accommodations, though, typically that are made in the special education world, we can make with just conversations where the kids can get the things that they need. And we're actually doing those things for all the kids. So I would say, yeah, 80, 90%, if it's like an emotional or thought attitude type thing, we can coach that. And then for those kids who really do need something different, we work with their parents and with experts to help us understand how that child learns and what else they need to be successful.
Katie, Grace just asked if there's guidance for social emotional learning. Does that include social emotional learning as well?
Yeah, totally. So much of what we do is social emotional, and we're always trying to increase our guides' awareness and skill level at addressing those needs. It's one of our biggest priorities.
Kelly, can you talk about, Chris asks, how many states are you in so far?
So much, most of our students are in Arizona. That's where we have these partnerships with schools. So the funding makes it free to parents. We're just now opening a couple in Utah. We're talking to people in California and Nevada. So we're just on the cusp of opening up in additional states, but for the most part, Washington State, but Arizona is the predominant state right now, and it's because it's free in Arizona.
Oops, I muted myself and then started talking. I think that covers most of our questions. Thanks you guys for being here with us tonight. We kind of set this up not really knowing how many people would come and how many people would be engaged, and we've had a lot of really, really great questions and engaged folks listening into the presentation. So thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight. If you want to take the next step and get started, if you're a parent and you're wanting to look at options for your kids, go to prendaschool.com/start. And if you are a guide, you can go to prendaschool.com, or if you are a guide, but if you're interested in looking into becoming a guide, you can go to prendaschool.com and then click on the Become a Guide link at the top of the page. Those are the two best ways to get started. You can also, if you just have questions that you want to get answered too, we have a contact page on the website that you can ask your questions there. We've got folks that are following up with everybody in our system. We have a lot of people that have requested information, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get to you, but we promise we will get to you and answer your questions.